I was just going to be right down here. Is that okay? And if it doesn't, if we need to move, I think it might be on. I hear that.
Are we on? We're ready? All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody this evening to First Unitarian Church of Toledo. I'm Joe Moran, a member of First Unitarian Church. And along with Ohioans to stop execution, I'm going to use the OTSE for the rest of the evening. We're co-sponsors of this evening's presentation by Professor Lain. We are delighted to host an event in keeping with our church's one of our first principles, or actually our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And now for a few housekeeping matters. You'll find restrooms outside the sanctuary on the right-hand side down the hallway. Professor Lain will be speaking about 30 to 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A of about 15 minutes up to about 7:30, at which time there's going to be a reception until 8 p.m. with light refreshments in the hallway, which is just outside the sanctuary. We would have had it in Fellowship Hall, but there was another meeting scheduled there, so we'll have plenty of room in the hallway, and you can also, of course, we can meet here in the sanctuary. There are two ways questions can be raised or entertained, either by having Krista, can you raise your hand? This is our church president. I was going to say she'll bring a microphone to you, but she's got a microphone. Her mouth is a microphone, right? She's a loudspeaker. And, or you can have her, you can fill out an index card with a marker there, and then she'll bring it to Professor Lain or bring it to me, and I'll give it to the professor. Professor Lain has brought copies of a recent book for sale, for purchase. She'll be happy to sign copies at a table just outside the sanctuary. Strongly encourage you to buy a copy of this and read it. It's an amazing piece of research. You'll also find an OTSE table with her literature and ways to get involved with anti-death penalty works and action steps such as writing letters to legislators. Now, I want to recognize a couple of individuals that have provided great support in organizing the event and great support, personal support to me. One is Ty Barnes at the very back, campaign organizer for OTSE. Ty, raise your hand. Thank you so much for all the work you put into this. And the other is Sue Carter. Sue Carter of the Ohio ACLU and the foundation board of OTSE has been also a valuable resource. She's one of my partners. We work together on a lot of these projects. I'm so thankful for Sue and all the work she does, and for her partner, Mike Ferner, who is another dynamic person in terms of social action and social justice. Sue, raise your hand if people didn't see you. I also want to thank Walter McGee and his tech crew at the very back for their assistance. Walter is a remarkable individual, and I'm not sure if he's a native of Richmond, but he certainly spent a lot of time in Richmond along with his wife, Julia. Finally, I'd ask you to please silence any electronic devices you have. Now, I want to introduce our speaker. Corinna Barrett Lain is the George E. Allen Chair in Law at the University of Richmond School of Law. She is one of the nation's leading authorities on the death penalty, and specifically lethal injection. Professor Lain graduated summa cum laude from the College of William and Mary and earned her J.D. degree from the University of Virginia, where she served on the managing board of the Virginia Law Review and was elected to the Order of Coif. She clerked on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals and then served as a state prosecutor in Richmond, Virginia, before joining the Richmond Law faculty in 2001. Professor Lain is also a former Army sergeant, as I am myself, and elected to the member of the American Law Institute and a recipient of the University of Richmond's Distinguished Educator Award. Most importantly, she is a person of deep and abiding faith. She's currently on a book tour for her newly released book, Secrets of the Killing State, Untold Story of Lethal Injection, and is here to talk to us about the book and the faith story behind it. So now please give a warm Toledo welcome to Professor Corinna Lain.
Can you hear me? Yes. All right. Joe, I just want to thank you for hosting me at this beautiful, beautiful space, and thank you all for coming, and thank you, that's not Julia. Okay, anyway, thank you. I'm looking at you, but thank you so much for everyone for coming. So I'm Corinna Lain, and yep, I have this book. I'm a death penalty scholar, so I could talk about the death penalty and kind of what I thought I'd do in the 30, 45 minutes that I have is I first want to share with you how I came to write this book. And when I started this tour, that is what I have asked, that is what I have sought after is, yes, I'm going to give these book talks, but is there a space where I can talk about the story behind the book and how I came to write this book? And so I'll do that. And then I thought I'd talk a little bit about the book because you're going to want to know a little bit about this book. State killing. And I thought, then I'll widen it out just a little bit and talk about the death penalty more largely. And I'll just tell you, two things. One, when we get to the question and answer, and I love that part because then I get to hear what's on your mind. So you can ask about, the book, about my faith journey. You can ask about anything about the death penalty. Like I said, I don't know if I told you, I've been studying the death penalty for 18 years now. So I know a thing. So, I can talk to you about whatever you want to talk about and what's on your mind, not just the book. And the other thing is the thing I always forget. And so I'm saying it right now. And that is, if you're so moved, what I would ask for an action step is not only to get involved with OTC, the folks in the back, but can you commit to tell 5 people one thing that you learned tonight? Can you commit to tell 5 people? Because if you can tell 5 people, it's kind of a small ask, but when the word gets going and the conversations get started, that's how we make change. And so that'll be my personal ask. Okay, well, without further ado, I'll tell you first about how I got involved in this. So I am a death penalty researcher. That's just what I do. And so we have, I'm a law professor, so, we have questions and we research them and then we write about them. That's part of my job. And I love it. I chose it. So, I've been doing that. And this project started with a research question, so it started in not an unusual way. My question, and I also come from a very humanist perspective that loves life, so forgive the clinical nature of it. But my question was, why are states so terrible at lethal injection? Why am I seeing 3-hour-long executions, 2-hour-long executions, and people waking up on the gurney and trying to get off the gurney in the middle of their execution, and autopsies with 16 and 18 puncture wounds? It's so that, there's the death penalty, and then there's this separate issue that had not been researched. And I just was like, I don't understand this, because we put people under anesthesia every day and do really, really painful things. We know how to put down our beloved pets. We know how physician-assisted suicide works. So, it was that sort of question that got me started. And so I was researching it, and about a year in, it became clear to me that this is a book. And I will tell you, I did not want to write a book. I did not. And I'm also a legal historian, and when I have two pretty deep veins of research. One is legal history and Supreme Court decision making. One is the death penalty. And when I get stuck on one, I just move over to the other, and it kind of works itself out, And so the piece I had been working on the legal history side was this constitutional law piece, and I was workshopping it, and faculties kept saying, there's a lot stuffed in here. It needs book-length treatment. And I so didn't want to write a book that I put that piece down. That thing's still down, just so you know. I got a 70-page paper out there with like 400 footnotes that is just sitting there because I did not want to write a book. So I put that down, moved to the death penalty area, and this is like, no, it's really big. It's going to be a book. So I set that down too. And that was in December of 2017. In this book project, 7 years. 7 years of deep research into lethal injection, researching and writing and getting past secrecy and all of the things. But so my story behind this book, there's really 3 parts, and I'll try to move through them fairly quickly so we can leave time for other things. But there was a call to write, and a call to wait, and a call to go. And this book tour, I'm on a book tour. This book tour is walking out the call to go. That's what this is. And if you want to know what would make a random law professor take a professional leave and drive around the country with her sister and talking to anybody that she can about the death penalty, only a clear call. For the Lord would make me do something so completely outside my comfort zone. And now, without further ado, I'm actually going to tell you, we're at the end of this tour. This tour is actually 32 cities in 87 days. So this is as of Lexington, Kentucky. There's like 2 stops between that and now, but we've driven over 10,500 miles across 18 states, in 27 cities, 39 events, and over 1,250 attendees. So it's been a whole thing. So it's been a thing. But this is the thing that I love the most, actually, is being able to talk in a setting like this and to talk to you about what's so personal about this particular project. So back to my story. A call to write, a call to wait, a call to go. So January 2018, I went to this conference. I put the project down. I'd been working on it in all 2017. I put it down when it insists upon being a book. And January 2018, I went to a conference that I never go to. It's the first week of January, which is a terrible time for a conference, I think. Everyone's tired from the holidays. The semester's about to begin. I don't know what these people are thinking. But anyway, I've been to that thing, I think, 3 or 4 times in 24 years. So I never go. But this time, January 2018, it was in San Diego in January on the law school's dime. So I was like, I think I will go to that, actually. I do want to go. So I go to this conference, and the way law professors relate to each other, it's like, hi, how are you? What are you working on? 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 Everywhere I went, what are you working on? And I felt very, very insecure because I had spent 18 months on the legal history piece with nothing to show for it, and then a year on the death penalty, on the lethal injection piece with nothing. So it had been about 3 years before I had published anything. And my world is publish or perish. My world is what have you done lately? So I understood. It wasn't just that I felt insecure and that I felt like a loser. I understood, that actually I was not where I needed to be. So this was very, very stressful. And I went to this one lunch, it was particularly stressful, and I skipped the 1 o'clock session, whatever it was, and I went up to my hotel room and got on my knees and prayed. And I'll just tell you, I call myself a free-range chicken Christian, which I don't know if that's like, I think it's very compatible with you, with where we are. But anyway, so I get on my knees and I just said, Lord, you know I don't want to write a book. And you know I don't want to write a book on lethal injection. And here's all the ways that this would be bad for me. But, you know, I was like, if I thought this was from you, if I thought this is what you were calling me to do, none of that would matter. And I just remember being like, but if this is from you, then speak clearly, because otherwise I'm not inclined to do this. And I'm kneeling against the bed at the hotel room, and it was thoughtless. I don't even know why I did it, but I just reached over to see if there was a Gideon's Bible there, and there was. And I just flipped it open. And I have some pictures, and so maybe we can get the first picture. There we go. And I'm going to read it to you because even on a bigger screen. But this is the top left. Like, I wasn't even scrolling down. This is the top page where my eyes went. It's Psalm 45. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. I recite my composition concerning the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. And I said, well, shit. I guess I'm going to write a book on lethal injection. And so that is the call to write. And so the call to write came in January 2018. And I wrote through cancer in 2019. I wrote through COVID in 2020. And it was a thing. And January 2022, I've got a draft of this book. So 5 years, right? I've got a draft. And I didn't set out to write a book. So I didn't, we're talking a little bit, I didn't know what kind of book I was writing. And I had been workshopping little chapters here and there to faculties over the years. And people would always ask me, well, who's your audience? Who is this for? And I would always say, well, I'm just trying to finish it. And, I'm just trying to get it on paper. But inside, always, I thought, I don't know, this is the Lord's book. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with this particular project. We'll just see. So January comes, and through this process, it'll be the second thing I tell you about, but I found about all these things. I came across, they're breaking state laws and federal laws, and they're falsifying prescriptions and smuggling drugs across the border, and the DEA is seizing them. All of this stuff where I was like, what? How did I not know this? So I really wanted it to be for the public. And so I thought, all right, and I'm praying on it, and, there's no passage in the Bible where it's like Barnes & Noble book versus academic book, So I was just like, okay, let me see. And I knew that if it was going to be a book for the public, and I wanted what they call a trade press, like Random House or Norton, that you need an agent for that. So what are the chances of getting an agent? If you Google it, and I'm sure Dr. Google's always right, but it's 1 in 6,000. Really, really hard to get an agent. So I thought, all right, if I get an agent, I'm going to go this direction. If not, I'll go this other direction. And I got an agent right away. And she was a really good agent. She had represented Maria Shriver and Mary Tyler Moore and Jodi Picoult. Like, she's an actual agent. I'm thinking, wow, here we go. This is great. No. She could not give this book away. I'm not kidding. She'd come from a big trade press, and so she was like, oh, I know all of the players. They're going to love you. And she sends it to all of the big presses, and one by one, they all said no. And then she said, well, that's all right. You would have gotten lost in a big press like Random House. There's some medium presses, great presses. It'll be perfect. One by one, they all said no. And then she said, well, that's all right. Small presses, they're going to love you, Corinna. And so she sent it to the small presses, and one by one, they all said no. And at the end, this little group of social justice presses. So we should be talking about that, Joe, later. But a small group of social justice presses. And she said, well, clearly this is an abolitionist book. So, they're going to love this. Someone's going to take this, don't worry. And one by one, they all said no. And I've come to realize that most agents meet with their authors maybe every other month or at the end of a month, at the end of a month or something. And they say, well, here's who we've heard from. No themes are emerging, or there are themes. You should start rewriting in this way. Not mine. Mine just forwarded me the no's. And so I got them raw. There's no market for this. Hard no. Don't like the writing. There's no audience for this. It won't sell. So I came into January 2022 with this draft, an entire year of just no's. All no's. No, no, no. And on December 7th, which I'm not quite ready for that slide, but it's coming. On December 7th, there were two small social justice presses left. And my agent said, one of these is going to take this. I have a really good feeling about it. And she said, you're 2 weeks in. The no's come pretty fast. It takes longer. It takes about 2 weeks. We're going to hear from them. She's like, I know. I feel great about this. On December 7th, 2022, after that full year, within an hour and a half, they both said no. And her last email to me was, I'm so sorry, Corinna, there's nothing more I can do. So I was actually supposed to go have, it was a mentoring meeting at a certain off-site beverage establishment with another law professor. And so I texted her and said, I'm ready for this. And she wrote me back and said, I got the date wrong. I'm at my daughter's school. We'll have to reschedule. I was like, oh, no problem. Easy peasy. And I packed up my stuff and I went home and cried, of course, and got back on my knees. And in this tearful mess, I'm saying, Lord, I don't understand. It's been 5 years. Did I not do it well enough? What was this even about? Was this about obedience to you? Was this about drawing me closer to you, which it had? I don't understand. And I had gotten confirmations over the years. I knew I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And so I did not understand how they could all say no. And, so I'm talking to the Lord about this and just crying. And then I was like, I don't understand this, but I need to know you're there. I need to know you're still here. I need to hear from you right now. And I flipped open my Bible, and now I'm ready for that second slide, if you don't mind. There we go. This Bible opens up to, I might say it wrong, to the book of Habakkuk. I tell you, I said a swear word. I was like, what the is Habakkuk? And it did rhyme. But this is the top left. Again, I'm not going down. This is what I read, and I'm going to read it to you. And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables that he may run that read it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. And Joe, I know you know those words because I can kind of hear you saying them by heart. But anyway, so I cried again, this time at the Lord's faithfulness. And, I had been driving home and thinking, okay, calm down. All is not lost. You could do an academic press. You just have to write it all again, and you have to make it more sophisticated and more theoretical and use bigger words. But that's not what Habakkuk told me to do. Habakkuk said, make it plain. And so it was very clear to me as I was reading it. It's like, yeah, I know all the trade presses said no. I want you to double down on the trade press. Make it even more trade pressy. So I was like, okay. So that was December 7th. 2 weeks later, it was December 20th. I'm ready for that one. I'm up in my bedroom. My husband's away skiing. And I'll just, pass it, wave at this one briefly. But I'm up in my bedroom. My husband's gone. I usually do my morning readings in my home office, but he was gone, and my bed was really warm. And we have a hardwood floor, and I just didn't want to get up, that's all. And I was like, well, it's just me and the dog. I've got this old Army Bible that's way down, and I reached down, and it did have a little dust on it, so I was like, sorry, Lord. And I just flipped it open, which was my habit from that fateful day in January, and it opened to Habakkuk 2:3, different Bible. And by the way, Habakkuk, it's a 2-page book of the Bible. Is 2 pages. And in all those 5 years of opening the Bible, not ever did it turn to Habakkuk. Now 2 Bibles have. And then finally, I was in my office, and I have what I call my work Bible. And, before I write on the death penalty, I do a little reading. And it's really just more like just mercy on everyone. On all the people, from the guards to the chaplains to the families to the person to the victims, all of it, and also protect my heart. So I always do a reading. And on January 7th, if we're ready for that one, well, you could just skip to January to the next one. Yep. Well, okay. Yep. That's Habakkuk. Could you skip to the next slide, Walter? Or not. Well, wow. Okay. Anyway, bottom line is, if you the next slide would be great, but if it's a problem, then we. Okay. Anyway, I open up my work Bible, and it opens to Habakkuk 2:3. So the only 3 Bibles that I have in my entire world, within 1 month, open to this 2-page book of the Bible. And in the meantime, my professional world was falling apart. In the sense, I had tenure, so that's fine. But my dean was like, "You're not going to get any more research money for this." My faculty had stopped asking me, how's the book going? It was like that. But I had a word from Habakkuk. And the next thing, if we could turn to the next slide where it shows Stephanie E.K. This was in March or April. You could just leave it right there. It would be great. March or April, I was getting a pedicure. I have these daughters that got me hooked on pedicures, and then they went away. So now I'm doing it by myself. And it was a Sunday, and so I just Googled Waiting on God sermon, because that's the season I was in. And up comes Waiting on God. It's a sermon by a woman I've never heard of, Stephanie E.K. I just hit play. 16 minutes in, you can't necessarily see it, but 16 minutes in, she says, now we're going to turn to a little-known passage in the book of Habakkuk. And it's 2:3. So I had a very clear word, that is the call to wait. And now I'll just continue and say, fast forward to the end of May. And so this is now 2023. It's 16 months after I finished this manuscript that took 5 years. And I was giving a talk in Puerto Rico and went to get my badge for the conference. And there was a booth, I walked by what I call the gauntlet. It's all the little booths. And the NYU Press booth was there. And I had been told, well, NYU Press has a trade press line. But I had a word from Habakkuk, so I was waiting. I didn't look at anything. I was like, nope, I'm not doing a single thing. I am waiting. And but I walked by, and she's just sitting there. And so I said, excuse me, is it true that NYU Press has a trade press line? And she said, yeah, and I'm the one who does it. Really? You got a book? And I said, I do have a book, but I'm waiting. I'm not ready to submit. And she was like, that's okay. Tell me about your book. And so I told her about the book, and she said, do you mind if I ask, why did you write a book on lethal injection? And I told her, listen, I know you don't know me. I know this is weird, but I will go to my grave saying I was called to write that book. And I showed her the picture. It's all on my phone. And she said, oh, it's not weird at all. My mom's a Methodist minister. And 6 weeks later, I had a book contract with NUIU Press, right? In their trade press line. And I now look back and go, boy, I wanted that trade press because I wanted to reach the people. But the Lord threaded the needle, because what I really needed was the academic backing of a strong academic press with a good reputation to stand behind my research, to say, we've done reviews, we've looked at her research, it's tight. And yet, written for the public. And so that's where I ended up. That's that. I'll tell you one last thing. So I told you there was a call to write, a call to wait, and a call to go. So the call to go, as soon as I signed the contract with NYU Press, and now we're in the summer of 2023, the manuscript was due in January 2024, and a writing retreat in Rome basically fell upon me for free. It's also known as dog sitting for a friend's dogs. But I was talking to my dear girlfriend who was my law school roommate, and she's also godmother of my girls, so we're very close. And she works for one of the UN agencies and is headquartered in Rome. And she had to do this traveling. She didn't know what to do with these dogs, and they're trouble dogs. And I said, Katie, I'll be your dog sitter, and I'll do this writing retreat. I'll use it to finish the manuscript. So I'm in Rome living, it's like, who does that? Not me, but I did. For 5 weeks. Actually, 3 days after I got there, she WhatsApped me and said, Corinna, I forgot. I have this woman, she's on salary with the UN, and I have to give her hours. Do you mind if she comes and cooks for you 3 days a week? I mean, I'm telling you, right? I'm just raining. And I'm like, let me pay her. She's like, no, she's on salary. I have to give her hours. I'm like, okay. So it was like this really a magical experience. Anyway, I get to the end. It's the week before I leave. And I realize I've worked on this manuscript. I've done the dogs. I didn't bother to go to the Vatican. And I'm not Catholic, but I was like, really? You're going to go back to Richmond, Virginia and say I lived in Rome for 5 weeks and I just didn't bother to go to the Sistine Chapel? And I was like, no, that's not going to be my story. So what are the chances I can get tickets to the Vatican? 0. Like in the next 5 days, none. But I did find a way to get into the Sistine Chapel. An overpriced ticket to a tour, which even then was not in English. I couldn't get it in English. But it was a tour to the Vatican Gardens and Sistine Chapel. So they won't let you in the Vatican Museum, but you walk the gardens and they'll let you in. Fine, great. Wasn't on my list, but I would love to walk the Vatican Gardens to get into the Sistine Chapel. So I didn't even get the little headphone things because I don't speak Italian, and it was in Italian. And so I put in my Jesus Jams playlist, and I'm walking in the Vatican. I'm in this small group. Her mouth is moving. People are listening to her. I'm just at the back. I'm just taking pictures of rose bushes and statues. And I go to take this picture of a fountain because it had little frogs on the side, and my husband's an environmental lawyer, and he has frog cufflinks. So I was like, okay, John will love this. But I'm walking through talking to the Lord about the call to write the book and the call to wait and Habakkuk and this thing that came upon me and meeting the woman from NYU Press. So I'm just like in awe and talking to the Lord about it. And I go to take a picture, and Walter, can you do the picture of the fountain? And there it is. I don't know if you can see this, but a white dove photobombed my picture. Look at that. It's crazy. And I could not have taken that picture. I just want you to know I'm terrible at taking pictures. You can ask Mandy. But anyway, so, that happened. And then I'll just tell you one last thing. I feel like I've taken way too much time already. But at the end, the book comes out in April. And I had some invitations at other schools. Everybody knew I was writing this book. And so I thought about it and was like, oh, wait. I have invitations at UNC and Duke and South Carolina and in Atlanta and Tallahassee and Alabama. And I'm like, I think I could drive this thing. So then I was like, all right, I'm going to need to take a leave, which I did. And then I thought, well, then I could talk to people, like not just academics, but other people. And to do that, you need to get a publicist. So I got a publicist. And, she sent the estimate of what this would run. And I called my husband, who said, well, he said, you have a new nickname, Professor Moneyhole. That's what he calls me, affectionately. But anyway, he's like, we can do it. Here's how we're going to do it. And I got back on my knees and said, Lord, I'm a yes. I've been a yes. I am still a yes. But, here's what this is going to require. And I remember praying, like, they're going to be mean to me. They were never mean to me. But I was like, they're going to be mean to me. There were J6ers that had just been, pardoned. I'm like, I could be in danger. I was not in danger, but I didn't know that. And I was like, I don't know that I can change a single thing. Not a single thing. So I'm like, Lord, you know how to speak clearly to me. If this is what you're calling me to, then speak clearly and I will go. This is the last picture. If you could show the last picture, that'd be great. Thanks, Walter. And I'm just going to look at it down here. It's a verse. It opened to, oh, look at that. You're so good. It opens to Ezekiel chapter 2, and I'll read it to you. It said, and he said to me, Son of man, stand upon my feet. I'll speak to thee. The Spirit entered unto me. And then I'm going to go down to verse 4. For they are impudent children and stiff-hearted. I do send thee unto them. And thou shalt say to them, Thus saith the Lord God. If you could keep going down, that'd be great. And they, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are a rebellious house. Yet they shall know there's been a prophet among them. I am not a prophet, but I am a girl with a testimony. This is kind of close. And thou, son of man, be not afraid of them. Neither be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns be with thee. Be not afraid of their words, nor dismayed at their looks. They're a rebellious house. Can you scroll down just a little more? And thou shalt speak my words to them, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, for they are most rebellious. One more time, thanks. 8 and 9. But thou, son of man, hear what I say unto thee. Be not rebellious like that rebellious house. Open thy mouth, eat what I give thee. And when I looked, behold, a hand was sent unto me, and lo, the roll of a book was therein. Okay, that's the testimony. But, I needed to share this. And so I just want to thank you for listening. I know you came to listen to a book talk, now I'm going to turn to the book talk. But this is very important to me. To share what happened to me and why this happened. So I'm going to just pause there and then move into the book a little bit. So this book is not a book where I make an argument and try to convince you I'm right. This is a book where I relentlessly document what the states are doing in our name. That's it. And, I tried to do the most comprehensive without scaring people away. So it's all stories. And some are more disturbing than others, but it's all storytelling. This is what happened here. This is what happened here. And whether it is, I start by saying, how did we get here? How did we get lethal injection? I was like, surely there's some kind of science behind lethal injection. It's not like somebody just made it up off the top of their heads. Alas, someone made it up off the top of their head. And so this was Oklahoma in 1977. And some of you may know the Supreme Court struck down the death penalty in 1972, as it was then administered, and then brought it back in 76. And by 1977, we've got this brand new death penalty, and the country had not seen an execution in 10 years. The last execution was 1967. And so legislators were very, very worried about whether the American public would have the sort of stomach to see the abject state violence and brutality. All we had at the time was the electric chair and the gas chamber. And those are gruesome, brutal deaths. Those are terrible. In fact, the electric chair is the only execution method, bit of trivia, that 2 state courts have themselves said this violates the state constitution, protection against cruel and unusual punishments. And those courts this was the Supreme Courts of Nebraska and Georgia. I know, right? I'm like, well, if Georgia is like, no, this is really bad, it's bad. So, that's what they had. And what most people don't know is that a federal court at the time had recognized a First Amendment right to televise executions. Now, it wouldn't last, but nobody could have known that. And so one of the things that I also do is quote legislators who are saying, well, we can't have an electrocution in someone's living room. That's not going to go. So in Oklahoma, they turned to the state medical examiner, the coroner, and he described himself as an expert in dead bodies, but not in how to get them that way. And he made up the protocol, and I went and found an interview, asking him, how did you come up with this 3-drug protocol? And he said, I didn't do any research. I just thought about what might be useful. You wanted 2 drugs, so if one didn't kill him, the other would. And the interviewer said, well, why did you add a 3rd drug? And he said, why not? I didn't do any research. Why does it matter why I chose it? So that's how we got the 3-drug protocol. I'm happy to talk to you more about the protocols, but I will tell you in Ohio, and I'm so proud of Ohio, there's very few heroes in the story that I tell, but your governor is one of the heroes, to be honest. He'd be even more heroic if he ended the death penalty. But there was litigation over Ohio's protocol, and it's some of the best litigation in the country. Ohio was using this drug, midazolam, which is Versed. Some of you might know of it, Versed. The anesthesiologist called Versed a martini in a syringe. It'll relax you. It's also an amnesiac, but it is not an anesthetic. It is not an anesthetic. And they were using it as the anesthetic. So the 3-drug protocol that Chapman made up, this coroner, was supposed to be an anesthetic, and then a paralytic, and then this other drug, potassium chloride, which is basically road salt. And it is used in minuscule amounts to regulate heart functions, teeny. It has therapeutic uses. Sometimes it's used, are you okay? Yeah, it's okay. I just like, it has therapeutic uses, and sometimes will be used in processed food, but they're injecting these massive doses of potassium chloride into the veins, and that chemically burns the veins and then induces a cardiac arrest. So that's the 3rd drug. The 2nd drug is this paralytic, and I'm going to tell you about that. The 2nd drug is a pancuronium bromide, is what it's called. It's a paralytic. And it's not just a paralytic, it's a muscle relaxant. So it relaxes the muscles in the face, and then it freezes them that way. So you're going to get this, nice drifting off to sleep look, regardless of what is actually happening. And what we know now, because we have autopsies, is that the prisoners are dying from something called acute pulmonary edema. Perhaps you've heard of it. Pulmonary edema, as I've come to learn, is not incredibly rare, but it is fluid seeping into the lungs. That's pulmonary edema. Acute pulmonary edema, also known as flash pulmonary edema, is when the fluid seeps into the lungs in seconds and minutes rather than days or weeks or months. And so what's happening is they are, injecting the drugs, and the pH is different. So the body's pH, I'll just tell you a little. I promise you don't have to know science, but the body's pH is between a 7.35 and a 7.45, naturally. These barbiturates that they've used are highly alkaline, their base, and their pH is between a 10 and 11. And then midazolam, which Ohio was using, is highly acidic, and its pH is between a 2 and a 3. And what's happening is, normally the body does a really good job of buffering the difference in the pH. They have to buffer it so that they can actually use these drugs. The body can process it. But usually you don't have this massive overdose. And so as the body is trying to buffer it, even quickly through circulation, when you inject these drugs into the veins, it goes first to the heart and then to the lungs. It's the next place it goes. And so the body's working to buffer, but in the meantime, those drugs have already reached the lungs, and the difference in the pH chemically burns the little capillaries in the lungs and makes them leaky. And the lungs take on fluid, and you have acute pulmonary edema. So there was a court here, extensive litigation here, and a court wrote an opinion over 100 pages long and said, the medical expert said, yeah, you're drowning inside. And he said, so we're waterboarding people to death? And they said, yes, you are. So, the other thing I'll just tell you about the paralytic is it not only gives you this look, but it works from the outside in. And so the last thing that it paralyzes is the muscles in the body's core, which is the diaphragm, which pushes air into the lungs. So we also see in these autopsies distended veins because the people inside are like, trying to gasp for breath as the diaphragm is slowly becoming paralyzed. So I'm sorry, but these are terrible, terrible deaths. And it's happening under a paralytic. That makes it look like something else. And so I wanted to share that. But, I talk about that. I talk about who's doing these executions. Before I told you all the bad stuff that I just told you, is there anyone in here that thought it was a doctor doing it? Did anyone think it was a doctor? I thought it was a doctor. I thought it was. It's not a doctor. No, the people actually pushing the syringes are non-medical prison guards. It's the prison guards. And they're doing it from another room. So there's like a little hole. They call it an antechamber. There's the execution chamber, and there's this little room next to it. And somebody just basically took a circular saw and put a hole in the middle. And they're in the next room and pushing the drugs through 7 feet of tubing, of medical tubing. And if you ask them, well, how do you know how fast to push the syringes? They will say, as they did in Bays versus Rees in the first big lethal injection case, they said, well, we just do it by feel. And the medical professionals are saying, there is no feel. Through 7 feet of tubing in another room, there is no feel. And so that's some of the explanation. I mean, these are the sorts of things that I was finding when I'm saying, why is this so, why are they just terrible at this? And these are all of the reasons. So I talk about that, and it's all covered by secrecy. And so there's that's a serious problem. And the states can't get the drugs, and they can't get the medical professionals, and they can't get access to the veins. These people, this is a geriatric population with a documented history of poor health. A lot of them are former IV drug users. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not for state killing, and it's not my job to tell the state how to kill for sure, nor would I take that on. But if it were the last possible way I would ever think of is injecting a massive bolus overdose by a bunch of prison guards into a population that has notoriously weak veins. It's just, it's just a terrible idea. So I think the last thing I'll say on this point is my research question changed from why are states so bad at this to somewhere in those 7 years to like, why are states sticking with lethal injection? What is it about lethal injection? And it goes back to your comments actually at the beginning, Joe. And maybe this is a good place for me to pause. But, I've come to think lethal injection just does one thing well. Only one. And that is, it hides what the death penalty is. With lethal injection, we don't have to see the sight of blood. Like with the firing squad, we don't have to see or smell the sickly smell of burning flesh. That's the electric chair. We don't have to see people gasping and retching and convulsing. That's the gas chamber and the gas mask that some states are now using. We get to tell ourselves that these people are just falling into forever sleep. And I think that has made it easier to not think about what the death penalty actually is, to think about what state killing means. It's not just an idea. It's, state violence on steroids, right? And so this hides state violence. That's what's special about lethal injection, is that it hides state violence. Out of sight, out of mind. So my goal is to try to change that. And I do want to say this project also, and then I'll stop, I promise. But this project also gave me a front row seat as to who these people are at the end. Who is it that we're actually killing when we have the death penalty? And, I think there's a tendency to freeze these people in a single moment in time, right? You're the person who did X, and they always will be. But what I found time and time and time again is that person we're killing, that's actually not the same person who committed this crime. And so I see so many times the lawyers are so good, and there'll be an execution and they'll say, so I quote a couple of them, but they'll say, I'm thinking of Dustin Honkin. It was terrible murders, terrible. This is a Trump execution from 2020. And the lawyer said, there was no need to kill this man in haste or at all. In any event, they failed. They failed. The Dustin Honkin that they wanted to kill, he was long gone. That man wasn't there anymore. The man they killed actually had joined the Catholic ministries and was serving others every single day. And that's the sort of thing that I have seen time and time and time again. And I'll leave with one last little story. This was this summer, so it's not in the book, but Alabama executed this man. He had been on death row for like 27 years. And at some point, he had found his own faith, and he started the Church of Death Row for death row. And I think it was a Unitarian, that's what I think. But, when the state executed him, when they killed him, the prison chaplain came out and said, scarcely have I experienced such holiness in my life as that man. And he said, that guy you just killed? He was bringing people to faith that we couldn't touch him. He was able to do what we couldn't do. Only someone who, could say, I know the depths of despair. I know the depths of self-hatred. And let me tell you about this God that I know that loves you anyway. And I had listened recently to a podcast, and they were saying, you can't out-sin the grace. You can't out-sin it, right? Like even you, the capital murderer. And so that's what I'm seeing. And it's, whether it is inside or outside faith, I did this podcast with a Jewish rabbi, and he was quoting rabbinical text and saying, and then translating it for me. And he said, "Let no man stand between another man and his redemption." Right? And that's the death penalty. It really is. All right. Thank you. I'll stop.
Thank you, Corinna. Thank you for your amazing research and for your passion for this subject. We want to open up the questions for at least 15 minutes. I know that I've got some questions, but we have cards here that if you'd like to fill them out, or if you want to rise. And I'm not sure if you've got a microphone.
I have a microphone.
That's okay. She's got a microphone there. So you can either, she will come to you, Krista will, or she'll hand a card to you if you want to bring it forward.
Mike?
Yes.
Just hold it and you can speak right into that.
Mike.
My question is, when you were a prosecutor, did you have any capital cases you had to deal with?
No, I didn't, and I'm so thankful that I did not. I had 2 murder cases. I was just a prosecutor for 3.5 years. And they called me the token liberal of the office to my face. But I had 2 murder cases, and they were sad, pathetic, case. I mean, they all are, but I didn't have anything close to a capital case, and I'm really, really glad that I didn't. My specialty was child sexual assaults. So, I spent a lot of time and really understand the depth. And I have something to say about the death penalty for victims if you want to hear that. But, I can tell you, I remember the first time, I didn't really think about the death penalty. I didn't have any of those cases. Just wasn't something that I really thought about. And, but when I was interviewed, I was asked, could you ask for death in a case? And I was like, oh yeah, in an appropriate case, I could. And then I just, I'm telling you, by the grace of God, I didn't have that. But I can remember being a young researcher, a young professor, and I remember the moment where I was like, wait, what? I came across this case. This was the Birding case in Texas, where the lawyer fell asleep during a capital trial, during the trial. And the lawyer did not say, like, I wasn't asleep, I was looking down, or like my eyes were closed, but I was strategizing. The lawyer said, yes, I fell asleep, but it wasn't during an important part. And that's what I said. I was like, what? In a capital case, it's all an important part. And what the trial court said, I still have my students read this particular opinion. The trial court had a line where it said, the Constitution says you're entitled to an attorney. It doesn't say he has to be awake. And in that moment, a light came on, and I thought, I think, maybe I'm late to the party. Maybe, others had, a more inherent sense or more thoughtful than I was. But I thought, I think even for death penalty supporters, I'd like to think that there's a set of assumptions that come to that. I would like to think that good people on both sides of the aisle would say, oh, right, if you're going to kill someone, you can't have sleeping lawyers. You can't have drunk lawyers. You can't have grossly incompetent lawyers. You can't have prosecutors hiding evidence. And it's, so I feel that in my 18 years of studying the death penalty, I had all of these assumptions, underbaked assumptions, and none of those were true. Not a single one of them. And so my own work, maybe redemptive work, is to come out as a former prosecutor and say, all right, y'all need to know, But yeah, it's a good question. And there are 2 behind you too, just so you know.
Okay. Oh no, because we're recording on the internet. Hold that down. Maybe.
This is
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about it. I talk about it in the book. I document it. So, you know, the executioners, and again, this is something where this is part of my personal growth. I've been studying the death penalty all of these years, and it wasn't until I started studying executions that I was like, oh my gosh, wait, you know, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? And that's, executions are where the death penalty rubber hits the road. That's where it's really playing out. So these executioners that I document, you know, what they say is, they say, listen, by the time a death warrant comes down, we've been living with this person for 10, 20, 30 years. Mississippi executed a guy on death row for 50 years this summer. Right? I'm like, you might as well have just gone and grabbed someone from the street, right? He's nowhere near, like, he's not that person at all. But they say, yeah, you know, we've been living with them. We know that they could be safely housed for the rest of their lives. We've gotten to know them as human beings. We know that they're not the same person. And then an execution warrant comes down and we have to kill them. And you can't expect that there will not be an effect from that. And so I document depression, divorce, suicidal thoughts, alcoholism, substance abuse, all kinds of things. And the family members. It's not just the executioners, it's also the family members. So I quote some family members that said, you know, we never had a great relationship with our dad, thought he suffered from depression. Our entire time he was always withdrawn, wasn't really available. He died and they found out he was the executioner, right? And they were just like, oh, no wonder he was so dark and sullen and didn't have joy. And, you know, and so it's like it goes beyond even that. And then there's this one, and I think this is important to recognize. There's this one that I quote, an executioner who says, yeah, it was really, really terrible at first, really traumatic at first. But now it ain't no different than getting a beer out of the fridge. And so I think that question is so important because I want to say to executing states, tell me which of these is okay. Which of these is okay with you? Right? This is your choice. You either have the people who are destroying themselves, getting destroyed because they're killing for a job, and they're killing this person. You know, I'm like, it's like we're killing someone who killed, probably, we should talk about actual innocence, but, you know, probably, but is no longer a killer. But then who are we creating when we ask someone to kill for their job, right? And it's either going to destroy them or they're going to detach, and it's like, congratulations, you just created a cold-hearted killer, right? And so I think that's a very important question, and it goes hand in hand in my mind with the effects on the victims. You know, a lot of times I think death penalty supporters, I've been asked this as I've traveled around, what about the victims? Did you hear from any of the victims? You haven't talked to them, have you? And actually I have. But you know, one implication, one consequence of the fact that people do change over time is that they're not the same person. And, you know, these death penalty cases, they take about 2 decades. I think the average time from death sentence to execution is 20 years now, might be 21. And I'll tell you, I will defend that time till I'll go, that's the hill I'll die on. You can't even use these, you know, these little idioms anymore, but I will defend that all day long because, you know, we now have over 200 people that have been exonerated for death row. And by the way, this is the modern era, we've had slightly over 1,600 executions across the country. So from 1976 to now, it's like, I don't know, 1,630 or something. And 201, maybe 202 exonerations. And so when you do the math, for every 8 people we execute, there is one person that we admit Oh, sorry about that. We got it totally wrong. 8-1. That is I'm just like, that is indefensible. That's not even 10-1. And the National Academy of Sciences did a study, and peer-reviewed at the highest level, and they said, this is a conservative estimate. We estimate 4.1% of all people on death row right now are factually innocent. That's 1 in 25. It's 1 in 25. And of course, the problem is they're all saying, well, it was me, right? We don't know who they are. But 1 in 25 sitting there on death row right now. But I'm just like 1 in 8, right? So it takes time to find those. And then also, I think an important data point is that anywhere from half to 2/3 of all death sentences are reversed on appeal. So I just came out of Indiana. Their reversal rate, 70%. 70%. And by the way, the top 2 reasons nationally for this high reversal rate, prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel. So again, I'm like, those are not technicalities. Those are not misplaced paper clips. Those are serious errors that I need to believe that good people on both sides of the aisle would be like, oh yeah, we can't, like, no. And so those take time. So it's gonna take time. It's gonna. Justice Brennan said Breyer said in an opinion from years ago, he said, you can have a fair death penalty. I don't think you can, but anyway, you can have a fair death penalty or you can have a fast death penalty. You cannot have both. You cannot. It takes time. So it's going to take a couple decades. And if we were really honest with the victims, I'm actually going to write a law review article about this. I'm so mad about it. But, the victims are told, these victims' families are told, it'll give you closure, right? If we were really honest, what we would say is, you just lost this most important person in your life, and now we're going to take at least 2 decades of your life. You will not move on. Your whole family, your life will revolve around this case. You will be tethered to it for decades. And chances are 50 to 65, 70% that it will be for nothing because that death sentence is going to get reversed. And so it will just be dragging you along. And then we would tell them, if we were being honest, then you should know that if you should be one of the small percentage of people that actually sees an execution, there's a really good chance that after all that time, the executioners are going to feel sorry for them. They get wheeled in wheelchairs. They get propped up on medical pillows because they're on oxygen and they don't want them to suffocate while they're killing them. It's really pathetic and debasing, or they've been redeemed, they've started a prison ministry, and either way, imagine being that victim and everyone's feeling sorry for this and you've been waiting for a couple decades. So I just think the death penalty is really bad for victims, and that is a narrative that needs to be out there too. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, okay, so yeah, thank you. So there were 2 things that happened that Ohio's governor stepped in. The reason why Ohio has not had any executions, it might have been since 2020, maybe it was 2022, I can't remember, but it's been years, is because of your governor. So there was this litigation, I told you about it, where the lawyers did an amazing job showing, nope, here's the autopsies, acute pulmonary edema. Here's the world's expert on midazolam. They got that guy to show up. He had done the earliest trials that got midazolam FDA approval, so nobody knew more than he did. And he was like, no, they're awake. No, they can feel it. No, this is torturous. So they actually established that these are torturous deaths. And the way the law is, if you want me to tell you a little bit about Supreme Court cases, I can tell you that. I could do it like simply, but I'll just tell you now. The way the law is that you not only have to show a torturous death, but you have to provide the state with a feasible alternative way to kill you. So I call this the suicide clause, because to make this claim, you have to say, but you can kill me this way. And so in the Ohio litigation, he had shown the torturous death, but he had not, to the courts, he had not really shown the alternative. He just didn't do that. And so the court actually said, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm finding this is a torturous execution. And the judge even said, you would think under the Constitution that would be enough. But under the Supreme Court's interpretation, it is not. There's this other little thing that you have to do, and you didn't do it. And so and he said, this does not make the court comfortable, but I have to deny the claim. When he did that, your governor stepped in, and I quote him. He said, we're not going to have a torturous death under my watch. So he stopped it. There was another thing that happened that he also stopped it for that reason. And this is the drug companies have not wanted to sell their drugs for lethal injection. And so this has caused, it's the longest chapter of the book. It's my favorite, but it's called the drug supplier saga. So it just goes on. And then they did this, and then they did this, and then they did this. But one of the things that the states have done is make straw purchases. So all of these big pharma producers have contractual provisions saying, we're not going to sell you our drug unless you agree you're not going to kill people with it. We didn't make the drug for that. We've gotten sued when there's been a botched execution. We've had $50 million divested in us when our drugs are used in an execution, right? So it's not just about corporate core values, which one might be like, I don't know. It's also like they have a financial interest in not having their drugs used. So they've put all of these, they've adopted a costly system of tracking their drugs. And by the way, who do you think is paying for that? Yeah, it's you. But anyway, they've put these very, tight controls. And so what Ohio was caught doing, the Ohio Department of Corrections sent an email to the Ohio, it's like Department of Health and Human Services or Veterans Affairs and Substance Abuse Services, I can't remember, but sent an email to them, whether it's Health and Human Services or not. It's over the Veterans Affairs, it's over substance abuse, it's over all of these things. And in this email, they said, this was the director of the Department of Corrections writing to his counterpart in this other department. And he said, when you buy the drugs, do not tell them it's for us. And do not tell them what we're going to do with them, because there's a contract on there and they won't sell it to us. So what happened is that email got leaked, right? And I think it was through a FOIA request. I saw it in the paper. And the drug company, the big pharma company, said, if I can't trust you to honor the contract, which is the conditions upon which I'm selling to you, I'm not going to sell to the Department of Health and Human Services or whatever it is. This company, Merrick, we're just not going to sell to you anymore. And your governor issued a statement and said, yeah, let's put a pause on lethal injection, because the drugs that are required, he said, just the process of acquiring them could put tens of thousands of innocent Ohioans at risk of not getting the drugs they need. So in both of those ways, he, has stepped up. I sure would like to see him sign an abolition bill before he leaves, but I don't know, that that's going to happen. You want me to talk about that? Okay. hard, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay. I can. Oh. Oh, no, it is absolutely prohibited.
Let's make that the last question,
Okay.
so we can continue the discussion outside in the hallway.
Okay. And I will tell you that this book I was in the editing process. It was about to go to press. And Alabama said its execution for the very first nitrogen gas. And I turned to NYU Press and said, stop the press. Give me another week, because I want to work in what's about to happen into this book. And so I actually talk about it in 2 different places. And one of them, I'm gonna read it to you. The nitrogen gas is absolutely just terrible, terrible, terrible. The people who sponsored it, and I'll tell you, it was once again Oklahoma who first adopted it. Oklahoma adopted nitrogen gas based on a 14-page, double-spaced report, unpublished, by 3 liberal arts professors with no medical training whatsoever. And they were asked, did you get consulted? And they said, well, we tried. No doctors wanted to help us. We're history is repeating itself. And, but I'm going to tell you, this is what, can I be graphic? Is it going to be okay? Are you guys going to be okay? Okay. So the sponsor of this first bill, which once again, all the other states have just copied it, the sponsor said it's, quote, fast and painless, quote, you just sit there and a few minutes later you're dead. It's foolproof, he told the press. And by the way, the people who wrote these 3 liberal arts professors who wrote the report, one of the authors said, quote, how much time did you put into this? She said, quote, we probably talked about it for 3 hours. We did the best we could. The paper is so poorly written and sloppy and filled with typos that it actually spelled one of the authors' names wrong on the front. So they have the first execution, and the state attorney general said, and this is in the briefing, this is what they told a court, the state's method will rapidly lower the oxygen level in the mask, ensuring unconsciousness in seconds. This is, quote, the most painless and humane method of execution known to man. In all likelihood, hypoxia will cause unconsciousness in a matter of seconds, rendering the prisoner unable to feel pain. And by the way, I don't call it hypoxia. They're trying to call it hypoxia because they don't want to say the word gas. They are gassing people to death. So I'm like, it's nitrogen gas. I'm not using your word. I'm not, pussyfooting around with this. So in this first execution, which I documented, this was Kenny Smith, and it took him 22 minutes to die, and he writhed on the gurney in absolute, just torturous pain for at least 4 minutes. Here's what, he had a spiritual advisor with him inside the chamber, and here's what his spiritual advisor said, quote, I want to make something perfectly clear. Anyone who claims this was anything short of torture is not just mistaken, they are a dangerous liar. He said, Kenny was shaking the entire gurney. I had never seen anything more violent. Spider veins webbed in every direction. I kept wondering if his bulging eyeballs were going to shoot right through. Saliva, mucus, other substances shot out of his mouth. I could see the horror in his eyes. In fact, I'll never forget it. Afterwards, Alabama spokesman came out and called it textbook and said, quote, "Our proven method offers a blueprint for other states. Alabama has done it, now so can you." And the last point I'll make on this is the victim's son was there. He was a witness. And he came out after, again, I don't know any of these people, I just know, I researched what's in the media. He came out afterwards and said, "With what I saw, I don't ever want to see anything like that ever again." And it's just, even if you want the person to die, watching someone being tortured to death is a grotesque experience. And he said that he left and went back to his hotel, and that when he got to the hotel, the press report was, they were doing, the spokesman was speaking. So he said, "I just waited in the lobby and watched." And he said to the media, "Only half of what they said was true. I wasn't expecting that." And I'm like, that's the nub of the point, right? Like, we don't expect that. I think the average American thinks, they're not going to lie about this. This is the state at its most powerful moment, right? There's no more powerful moment than the state killing you. And so, it's a terrible, terrible method. But I don't really think there's a good way to kill someone. And I don't think the state is exempt from that rule. So maybe that's a good place to end. And I'm happy to, I'm chatty, you can tell. I'm happy to talk as long as you want, in our reception and stuff. So, if you have more that you want to talk about, I know we didn't get everyone's questions. I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
Corinna, on behalf of the Unitarian Church and OTSE, we want to give you this little token of appreciation. Now, we in Toledo, and maybe you in Virginia, know about the show called MASH. It was well, okay, so Jamie Farr, and he put us kind of on the map. So what is in here are some just jars of goodies, pickles, and so on from Tony Pacco's restaurant, and we hope you'll enjoy them. And again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. And now please join us, folks, for reception. We have some goodies, cookies, and coffee, and juice, and so on, and also a book signing by the author. So please join us. We also have a table out there with OTSE literature and ways you can get involved on a local level individually to help put, I like to say, let's execute the death penalty. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.